Dusk smothered the old cemetery as Luke paused by the rusted gate, clutching the chipped map he never needed. Gravel hissed under his shoes. A crow snapped a branch, and silence rushed in like water. The air smelled of wet stone and lilies left to rot. He checked his phone and found a new voice memo he did not record. Luke said, "I did not press anything." A whisper threaded the wind and shaped his name with a breath too close. He turned and saw only crooked markers and a path thinning into bramble. He swallowed and stepped onto the road. The iron gate moaned behind him without a hand to move it. He told himself the sound was wind, but the night disagreed. Far off, a lullaby leaked from nowhere and faded as if shy. Luke said, "Is someone there?" A tiny footprint surfaced in a shallow puddle and held its shape against the ripples. He backed away and felt the heat of a breath that never warmed the air. The phone flashed again and recorded static that rose like a scream. Luke crossed the narrow bridge and kept glancing at the rearview mirror that showed only rain slashing the road. He told himself the sound on the phone came from wind scraping iron. The mirror trembled with each bump, and his knuckles held pale on the wheel. A child's lullaby touched the speakers at a volume too soft to set. Luke said, "No radio." He pulled into a lay-by and let the engine idle like a nervous animal. The phone offered to play the memo, blinking with tidy certainty. He tapped it and heard a breath shape his name with a hush that barely moved air. He closed the app and the hush pressed on like a hand. Headlights picked out a soaked doll slumped at the edge of the road, and the glass eyes took the light kindly. Luke said, "Someone dropped that." He eased back onto the wet lane and felt the car lighten as if a weight climbed into the back seat. He did not turn around. The lullaby returned, patient and exact. Houses thinned as Luke reached the edge of town where hedges leaned like tired walls. He parked under a humming light and listened for ordinary sounds to anchor him. The phone lay face down on the passenger seat, yet the memo timestamp updated by a minute. Luke said, "You are not real." The glove compartment clicked by itself and released a stale church bulletin that smelled of wax. He had not been to church since a winter he never discussed. A faint knock tapped from inside the trunk, as if a small hand asked politely. He held still, counting 5 breaths, then 6. The knock repeated, closer, now somewhere within the cabin without moving anything. Luke said, "Stop." The word fell and did not break. He opened the door and the night breathed into the car, cool and curious. The lullaby seemed to float from under the seats, missing a note that made the tune wrong. Hein. Luke shut the door and drove home with the memo unopened, though the time kept growing without sound. The apartment lot held 3 cars and a broken security camera that blinked red as if faithful. He took the stairs, counting them the way he learned as a child. At his door, the hallway light flickered like a slow heartbeat. The phone vibrated and played the memo without touch, and a small voice whispered his name with a pleading lilt. Luke said, "I hear you." The bulb steadied, then dimmed until the hall became a tunnel. From the stairwell, a wet shoe print formed one step at a time, rising toward him. He fumbled the key, scraped the lock, and the door gave with a sigh that felt relieved. He stepped inside and set the phone on the table, screen down, as if face mattered. The whisper pressed against the wood and seeped through like damp. Silence in the apartment rang like a tone he could not place. The kitchen window showed only a lightless court and a single moth testing the glass. Luke wiped rain from the table and set a dry towel for the phone as if offering a truce. The memo ticked longer by itself, and a breathless hush drifted under the bedroom door. He did not open it. Luke said, "I will listen, just not now." The overhead light hummed, and then slipped to a low hum that made the plates tremble. A child's laugh arrived without joy, small and used to being ignored. The phone screen brightened and showed a waveform that pulsed like a heartbeat. He pressed play and waited. Static built, then cleared to a voice that could only exist because someone was wronged. The voice said his name, as if he had been late for years. The kitchen cooled, and his breath trailed like smoke. Morning brought no peace, only a brittle light that stretched shadows into knives across Luke's apartment floor. He brewed coffee with hands that shook enough to spill grounds like soil at a grave. He told himself sleep would erase the night, but no rest had touched him. His phone buzzed with a new memo, though he never pressed record. He shut it off and left it face down. Luke said, "You will not follow me today." The voice in his mind argued with silence. He sat at the small table, staring at the steam rising from the cup, and it curled into shapes he did not want to name. The smell of lilies seeped from nowhere, faint but bitter, the scent from the cemetery soil. He opened the window for air, but the breeze brought only the echo of a lullaby that stopped the moment he listened too closely. The day had barely begun, but dread walked beside him already. Luke met Jenna at the cafe where rain tapped the windows like fingernails. She smiled but frowned when she saw his face. Jenna said, "You look worse than finals week." He forced a laugh and said, "Bad dreams." She stirred her tea slowly, watching him as if waiting for more. He told her about strange sounds and shifting shadows, but he trimmed away the truth about the whisper that knew his name. She reached across the table, touching his hand. Jenna said, "You need real sleep, Luke." The warmth of her touch calmed him for a moment, until he noticed his reflection in the glass behind her blink, half a second late. He pulled his hand back, muttering something about leaving soon. She tilted her head and said, "You scare yourself more than the world ever could." The words stung, though her eyes carried concern. After the cafe, Luke walked to campus where he knew Professor Harris would dismiss his fears with logic. The old office smelled of paper and chalk dust. Harris said, "Hallucinations are common under stress, Luke. Sleep deprivation rewires perception." Luke nodded, but clenched his jaw, hiding the tremor in his hand. He wanted to believe him, wanted reason to replace fear, but the whisper still curled in his ears. Harris tapped a book closed and said, "You must ground yourself in fact. Ignore the nonsense. Do not let imagination trick you." Luke forced a smile, thanked him, and stood. The professor turned back to his desk, unaware that Luke's shadow stretched unnaturally long toward the door, moving slightly out of sync. Logic offered comfort, but the hallway outside still felt wrong, every echo sharper than it should be. Evening fell, and Luke lingered in the library, hoping the smell of old paper and the scratch of pens might drown his dread. A faint giggle drifted through the aisles, sharp as glass though no child belonged there. He froze, listening, then saw a book slide from the top shelf and land without noise. Luke said, "Not here." He picked it up and read the cover, "Child Burials of Blackwood Cemetery." His throat tightened as he placed it back. A student passed by, unaware of the cold hush that followed him. Luke packed his bag quickly, nearly running down the marble steps. Outside, the sky bruised purple, and lamps flickered one by one, never steady. He swore he heard the voice murmur from the book he carried in memory, not in hand. His steps quickened homeward, but the lullaby followed, just out of reach. Luke returned home with the book's title etched in his mind, though he never carried it out. He tossed his bag on the couch, but the sound was muffled as if absorbed. The apartment seemed heavier, the air thick with damp. His phone lit up with another memo, lengthening by itself. He refused to open it, set it inside a drawer, and slammed it shut. Luke said, "Not tonight." The light above flickered weakly, and the walls felt closer. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, and every second stretched. Then the faint thud of small feet echoed down the hall, though he lived alone. He squeezed his eyes shut, whispering, "Sleep, just sleep." But the laugh returned, quieter now, almost fond, almost forgiving, though it filled the room with ice. Sleep never came. Luke woke to the sound of toys scraping across the apartment floor, though he owned none. He sat up and found small wooden blocks arranged into a crooked word, "Stay." His heart rattled inside his ribs. Luke said, "What do you want from me?" The silence answered with a low hum from the fridge that shifted into a faint laugh. He crept to the living room and found his shoes soaked with mud, though they had been clean the night before. He touched the damp laces and smelled earth, sharp and wet, like the cemetery path. The air stung with rot and lilies. He backed away, whispering, "Not here." His phone buzzed in the drawer without opening, and the wood shook as if tiny fists pounded inside. He covered his ears, trembling, until it stopped. Later, Luke stood at the mirror, splashing water on his face, but his reflection lingered a second behind. The glass fogged, though the air was cold. Luke said, "You're not me." The reflection smirked faintly, though his lips stayed still. He dropped the towel, backing into the hallway, but the mirror cracked without touch, spiderwebbing across his face. The sound echoed far louder than it should have, like stone splitting. He stumbled against the wall, shaking. In the bathroom air, a child's giggle floated, muffled as though underwater. He reached for the light switch, but the bulb burst, leaving him in a smear of shadows. He fled the room and slammed the door, chest burning, ears filled with the ghost of the laugh. By afternoon, Luke met Father Thomas, the parish priest, at the church courtyard. The priest said, "You look hunted." Luke whispered, "Something followed me home from Blackwood Cemetery." Father Thomas tightened his jaw and crossed his arms, eyes cautious. He said, "That ground has been restless for decades." Luke felt a shiver climb his back, realizing the priest believed him. The bells tolled, each strike heavier than the last. Father Thomas glanced toward the chapel doors and lowered his voice. "A child was never buried properly. Her soul lingers." Luke said, "She knows my name." The priest placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Then she chose you." The words struck harder than the bells, filling Luke with dread that knotted deep inside. That night, Luke sat in the living room, lights dim, trying to read, but every page flickered with faint handwriting that was not printed there. The words said, "Don't leave me." He threw the book down, heart pounding. The TV turned on by itself, snowy static filling the screen. The sound shaped into the same lullaby, each note twisted. Luke said, "Stop it, please." The lamp beside him shattered, sparks spraying across the carpet. The static hiss rose higher until it matched the pitch of a scream. He yanked the plug from the wall, but the screen still glowed. A child's pale face flickered in the static, staring. His breath caught, his body stiff as ice. He hurled the remote, and the screen went black. Unable to bear the silence, Luke fled into the rain and walked until his feet blistered. The city felt empty, streets glistening with water, every lamppost buzzing weakly. He whispered to himself, "She wants something. I don't know what." Each puddle mirrored his figure, but in some, a small child's outline clung beside him. He refused to look down again. Passing a closed toy shop, he froze at the window display. A doll with cracked porcelain cheeks tilted its head toward him, though the others stayed still. Luke said, "Leave me alone." His voice bounced down the deserted street unanswered. The doll's eyes seemed to shine with rainlight. He turned and ran, each step echoing against buildings like hands clapping in pursuit. Luke returned to the cemetery with his hood pulled tight, the rain falling heavier as if warning him away. His shoes sank into the soaked path, the mud sucking at each step. He whispered, "I have to know." The air seemed to carry voices, a chorus of sighs. But one voice rose above them, a child's whisper calling his name. He followed the sound through crooked stones, each engraved name half lost to moss. The iron gate clanged shut behind him, though no one touched it. His pulse quickened. In the distance he saw a grave smaller than the others, its stone cracked, and a wilted bouquet pressed into the soil. He felt the weight of eyes on him from all sides, though he stood alone. Kneeling by the small grave, Luke brushed away mud from the inscription. His hands trembled as the letters formed. Evelyn, 1908-1915. He whispered, "Evelyn." The name felt heavy, as if the air itself thickened around it. The ground seemed to breathe, releasing a sour odor of lilies rotting. His phone buzzed, though it was dead, and the screen lit with a single word, "Remember." He stumbled back, heart pounding. A shadow flickered across the cracked stone. But when he turned, no one was there. He whispered, "Why me?" The grave gave no answer, only silence deeper than before. As Luke backed away, the ground beneath him gave a low groan, and soil cracked like ice. He froze, staring at tiny handprints forming in the mud, pressing upward as though something clawed toward the surface. A child's giggle echoed, hollow and wrong. Luke whispered, "Please stop." The handprints spread until they encircled him, closing tighter. He spun, searching for an exit, but the gate seemed impossibly far. Shadows bent unnaturally, reaching toward him. He tripped over a broken cross and fell to his knees, gasping as the prints dissolved into the rain. The silence afterward was worse than the sound. Luke fled toward the chapel at the edge of the graveyard, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, candles flickered, though no one lit them. The air was heavy with incense, yet beneath it lay the sweet sour rot of lilies. A hymn whispered faintly without voices. Luke said, "Evelyn, what do you want from me?" His words echoed too many times, as if the walls answered. In the candlelight he saw a child's shadow pass across the altar, though nothing stood there. He clutched the back of a pew, shaking, his breath shallow. For the first time, he felt the child was not only haunting him, but reaching for something unspoken. Luke staggered out of the chapel, gasping for air, the rain washing incense from his skin. He collapsed near the graveyard gate, his heart hammering. His phone buzzed again, screen cracked though it had never fallen. The word appeared once more. "Remember," he shouted into the storm, "I don't know what you want." A flash of lightning revealed Evelyn's small silhouette standing among the graves, head bowed. When the thunder rolled, she was gone, leaving only the imprint of small wet footprints leading toward him. He closed his eyes, whispering, "I can't escape." The wind howled through the stones, carrying the lullaby louder than ever. Luke spent the night at Jenna's apartment, hoping company might silence the whispers. She brewed tea and pressed him to explain what chased him. He muttered about the grave and the name Evelyn. Jenna said, "That's a child's grave. You're letting grief haunt you." He shook his head and whispered, "She knows my name. She follows me." Jenna frowned, brushing his damp sleeve, saying, "You're scaring yourself into madness." Her words carried care, but her reflection in the glass behind her tilted its head, smiling when she did not. Luke froze, heart hammering, whispering, "You don't see her." The reflection's eyes gleamed too brightly before fading into the window rain. The next morning, Luke walked with Jenna to the university library to research Evelyn's grave. He dug through records while Jenna scanned microfilm. "Can't wipe, I know," she whispered. "Here, Evelyn Carter died 1915. Cause unknown." Luke traced the faded obituary, voice trembling. "She was 7. Jenna said, "Children died young back then." "Illness, accident." Her words faltered as a line of the record darkened by itself, ink bleeding until it read "forgotten." Luke clenched his fists. She doesn't want to be forgotten. The lights above flickered, casting shifting shadows across shelves. Jenna shivered and whispered, "Luke, maybe we should dig deeper." But he knew they already had. That evening, Luke confronted Professor Harris with the records. He laid the obituary on the desk, voice strained. "Evelyn Carter, she's not resting." Harris adjusted his glasses, unimpressed. "You're letting superstition erode logic." Luke slammed his hand down, shouting, "She spoke to me!" The professor recoiled, silence hanging. For a moment, the office darkened though no lights had failed, and a chill swept through. Harris said softly, "Luke, belief makes monsters real." Behind him, books fell from shelves as if shoved by unseen hands. The professor turned sharply, face pale. Luke whispered, "Do you believe me now?" Harris said nothing, only staring at the floor where small wet prints trailed into the room. Unable to stand the silence, Luke sought Father Thomas again at the chapel. The priest listened grimly as Luke said, "She wants me to remember her. But why me?" Father Thomas lowered his eyes, whispering, "Because you share blood." Luke's heart seized. "What do you mean?" The priest unfolded a brittle parish record. Evelyn Carter was your great-grandfather's child. She died unblessed, and her soul never released. Luke staggered back, shaking. He whispered, "She's family." Father Thomas said, "She will not rest until the truth is carried forward." But revenge hides beneath her sorrow. The candles guttered, shadows twisting like reaching arms. Luke stumbled out into the storm, reeling from the revelation. The wind whipped his hoodie, rain blinding his eyes. He shouted into the night, "Evelyn, I know who you are." Thunder cracked overhead, drowning his voice. Lightning revealed her small figure at the cemetery gates, staring, her dress torn and dripping with rain. For a breath he saw sorrow in her face before it warped into fury. She vanished with the thunder, leaving only her laugh carried on the wind. Luke fell to his knees in the mud, whispering, "You're my blood, but you want to destroy me." The rain washed the words into the earth, as if she heard them. Luke returned to the cemetery at midnight, the storm easing to a cold drizzle. His breath clouded, each exhale sharp as glass. He whispered, "Evelyn, I'm here." The silence bent, carrying the faint hum of her lullaby. Lightning cracked, revealing her silhouette at the small grave. She did not move, but the air pulsed with her fury. Luke's chest tightened as he stepped forward, mud clinging to his shoes. He said, "You are family. I know the truth now." Her head tilted, sorrow flickering before her shadow, lengthened into something monstrous. The ground trembled, and he felt his bloodline tighten around him like chains. The air thickened until Luke's ears rang, and the gravestones around him shook. He shouted, "You deserve peace, Evelyn." Her form flickered closer, her eyes glowing like wet glass. She whispered in his head, "You left me." Luke gritted his teeth, tears mixing with rain. "I wasn't even born yet," he cried, "but I remember you now." The soil erupted with skeletal roots twisting around his feet, pulling him down. He clawed at the ground, desperate. Evelyn's face blurred between child and vengeful spirit, her voice both cry and scream. The night pressed against his ribs as if the earth itself wanted him buried. Luke collapsed to his knees, whispering a prayer he barely remembered from childhood. The rosary Father Thomas had pressed into his hand glowed faintly as he clutched it. The roots recoiled, smoking as if burned. Evelyn shrieked, the sound shredding through the cemetery like broken glass. Luke shouted, "You're not forgotten. I carry your name now." The air stilled for a heartbeat, and her form flickered with the innocence of a child again. She whispered, "Remember me," softer this time. Luke's chest heaved as the rosary's glow faded, leaving him shaking. The storm paused, but he knew the peace would not last. Luke rose shakily, whispering, "Evelyn, I will not forget you." Her figure drifted backward, circling him, eyes never blinking. She whispered, "Blood ties you to me. You carry my silence." He turned in panic, following her voice, but she moved like mist, always just behind. Gravestones cracked as her presence surged. Luke said, "If you want me, take me." His voice shook, but the courage carried weight. The lullaby returned, mournful now, the melody slower, fractured. Evelyn's form leaned close, her breath icy on his ear. She whispered, "Not yet." Then her shadow stretched long into the soil, pulling the song with it. The storm finally broke, leaving only drizzle and the faint smell of wet lilies. Luke stood trembling, the rosary heavy in his hand. He whispered, "She won't stop until I set her free." His phone buzzed one last time, the cracked screen lighting with words, "Tell the world." He closed his eyes, tears streaking his cheeks. He whispered, "I'll carry your story." In the silence that followed, the lullaby ended mid-note, leaving a hollow stillness. Luke turned toward the gate, but small wet footprints trailed ahead of him, guiding his path. His pulse slowed, but unease lingered. She had not gone. She was only waiting. Dawn found Luke at his kitchen table, writing Evelyn's name again and again until the ink bled. He whispered, "I will tell them." The apartment listened like a patient witness. He He typed a post about the forgotten grave, the parish record, and the lullaby. He attached photos of the cracked stone and the wilted lilies. The cursor blinked as if counting his doubt. Luke said, "You are not invisible." He hit publish and felt the room exhale. Somewhere a glass clicked softly, like a child setting down a cup. The silence held, not empty, but waiting. By noon, comments flooded in from people who knew the cemetery's neglect. A council member messaged about restoring children's plots. Journalists asked for interviews. Luke said, "Talk about Evelyn first." He sent them the name, the dates, and the parish note. His phone hummed with replies that felt like candles lighting one by one. For a few hours, the lullaby did not play. He sat very still, fearing any movement would break the fragile quiet. The walls eased back. The room felt larger, as if someone small had stepped out of the corner. That evening, Father Thomas arrived with a small vial of holy water and a cloth book. He said, "If she is ready, this will guide her." Luke nodded, hands trembling. They drove to Blackwood as the sun bled out behind clouds. The priest read a rite at Evelyn's grave, voice low and steady. Luke said, "I remember you," and laid lilies that did not smell of rot. Wind rose, then softened, and the earth stopped breathing like a wound. For a long moment, the lullaby returned as a true melody. The priest closed the book and sighed, as if a weight had moved. Night fell gentle, and Luke returned home carrying a tired piece. He set the rosary on the table and breathed without counting. He said, "Rest now, Evelyn." The phone lay dark for the first time in days. He made tea and watched steam rise like quiet ribbon. The apartment sounds turned ordinary, pipes ticking, fridge humming, wind harmless at the window. He allowed himself a smile that felt strange on his face. He whispered, thanks to the empty room. The room did not answer, and that felt right. Near midnight, a notification chimed from the posted story. Luke glanced at the screen and saw a new comment with no name. It read, "I remember you too." The cursor crawled across the comment box by itself and typed his full name with careful patience. The apartment cooled as if a window opened inside the air. From the hallway, small wet footprints formed and stopped just short of the kitchen tile. Luke said, "Evelyn," barely breathing. The lullaby returned, missing the same note as before. The phone began to record on its own and did not stop.